Welcome everyone to today's webinar. Just a couple quick housekeeping notes before we go ahead and get started. Everyone is muted, so if you have any issues, please either use the chat function or there should be a questions tab, and just click that, and we'll monitor that and try to address that. Couple other notes: this is being recorded, so it'll be available for viewing at the conclusion of the webinar. If you have anything you want to go back and look at. So yeah, I think that covers everything. So with that, I'd like to welcome everyone to today's webinar, Holistic Approaches to Business Recruitment. We are joined today by Casey Woods, who is the Executive Director of the Emporia Main Street Program in Emporia, Kansas. A little bit about Casey. Before accepting the director position in March of 2009, he worked in both retail and agricultural jobs with his family. A lifelong resident of the Emporia area, he was a 10-year volunteer for the Emporia Main Street Program prior to his appointment as director. During that time, he served as the organization's president and chair of Business Enhancement Committee, among other posts. As part of Casey's Main Street duties, he routinely discusses techniques to improve businesses, organizations, and communities through organizations design, promotion, and other business enhancement activities. So with that, I will turn it over to Casey to walk us through today's webinar. Oh, and just one other thing, if anyone has questions about topics Casey's covering, please feel free to just ask those as you have them, but we'll save all questions until the end of the webinar. So with that, I'll turn it over to Casey.
Okay. Thanks, Steve. I hope everybody's having a good day and that they're a little warmer than we are here in Kansas. A little bit about our organization. Emporia Main Street was founded about 27 years ago. We have about 230 members throughout our community. We've got a variety of different types of businesses, both inside and outside the downtown area, that are part of our organizational structure. I've got an ag and retail and consulting background. But I'll be a director. This will be my 10th year this coming March. So that's about 70 years in Main Street director years. And the community type, we're considered a rural community. We've got about 25,000 people in the community proper. We've got about 54,000 people within our market trade area population. Our market trade area is trending down a little bit just because we're surrounded by some very, very small rural communities. Our community, Emporia, is trending up slightly when it comes to population and median household income. And accolades, we received a GAMS award in 2005 and have received a number of other regional accolades over the years. So just a basic snapshot of the community as we get started. I think when we talk about business recruitment and a holistic approach, first, we understand that a lot of communities, most communities have some vacancies, and if they don't have vacancies, they have underutilization within some of their business mix, and businesses that may not make sense, or building uses that may not make sense within their community cores. And the results that we often see are pressure points that are exercised by community members to maybe fill some areas of downtown that with businesses or other activities that may not be in the long-term best interest of the community. For example, when we look at Emporia, this upper house that you see in the upper right-hand corner, we replaced with some mixed-use development that allowed for a lot of commercial uses that were more beneficial to that area on the bottom floor. We have a large historic theater that was once adjacent to a building that was sold a lot of secondhand merchandise, and we replaced that with a much nicer chocolate store, which kind of fed into the vibe that we're going for in an arts and entertainment district. So over time, we were able to make some conversions with a dedicated recruitment process, but most communities are dealing with that in some way, shape, or form. I think before we get into some of these approaches, which are coming very quickly, it's important to answer some basic questions about why it's important to find appropriate businesses and engage in those recruitment processes and what we're trying to achieve. Of course, we want to create kind of a destination for our community cores, but we also want to create jobs and improve building values that enhance the tax base overall and support this community growth ethos that all of us want to achieve within our communities. Finding buildings and finding businesses that we can put adjacent to other stronger areas, improve the overall business climate. And part of that is looking at the culture that we're trying to achieve within that core area. Some businesses don't get core development. They would rather be kind of on an island by themselves. Years ago, we recruited a furniture store into the downtown Emporia area that was relatively upset by all the foot traffic that was walking by his building, because in another community that we recruited store 2 from, he was the only game in town. So if somebody drove up into the front of his store, he felt like he was going to make a sale, versus a community where people were walking by and then just poked their head in and wanted to look around. That wasn't something that he was used to, and that was an adjustment that we had to make in our development recruiting approach for businesses, making sure that we were finding the appropriate businesses that fit the culture and they understood what they were getting into within core redevelopment. So I say, part of the publications that we talk about are kind of the icing on the cake. They're the last part of what you're engaging. Typically, before you're engaging in recruiting activities that are successful, there are a few steps that you need to take, or at least know where you're going prior to engaging in those processes. A lot of people will talk about the types of businesses that they want in their community without really understanding what they have from a building inventory standpoint, or what those businesses need from a building inventory standpoint to engage in their community successfully. Nobody wants to have their business located next to a dilapidated structure that looks sketchy or looks like it might be unsafe. Entrepreneurs specifically, and definitely chain stores or franchises, are going to look at the traffic patterns within the area that you're trying to enhance to see that there is a pre-existing traffic pattern. Nobody wants to go into an area and create the traffic. They don't want to be the first one in. They want to capitalize on that traffic that's pre-existing. Most of the businesses that you're dealing with from a recruitment standpoint are going to talk to other businesses within the area. And if those businesses are weak, or if they feel like they're struggling, they'll oftentimes communicate that to a potential business. So strengthening existing businesses is a critical function of the recruiting process that needs to happen prior to doing a lot of significant outreach. And then from an infrastructure standpoint, a lot of people will think about things like roads, but do you have a sufficient water system or sewer system? Or in our case, over the past few years, we've really bulked up on our fiber network within the downtown area, so that those technical-based businesses have access to redundant fiber that allows them to conduct business in the ways that they need to. And those infrastructure questions are something that have to be answered in a few different ways, and we'll go into some of those different publications here momentarily. But there are things that you need to have a grasp on prior to engaging in the recruiting efforts. That built environment can stabilize the risk in the mind of a lot of different consumers of products, and also the businesses that you're recruiting to an area. So if they see dilapidation, that's something that they're probably going to stay away from, because your community's trending in the wrong way. Most businesses aren't anti-downtown, they're just anti-volatility, and they want to know that their investment can be protected over time. So we say, as we're entering into those processes, don't fall into the mindset of a new business will solve all of our problems. You may have pre-existing problems that need to be adjusted for prior to engaging in recruiting over time. So Enhancing your community pride is important because your local citizens can be a great source of contacts for potential businesses. And identifying what your downtown or core is really known for. So who's your target demographic? What types of businesses are you known for? What anchors are you known for? You need to have a listing of your incentives and procedures that you can have for startups and expansions to make sure that you're expediting processes and you're putting people in a position to be a winning business. And then have access to data that enhances your ability to talk to those businesses about their customer. How many of their customer type you have within the area? How do your customers think? What are the best ways to reach out to them? Remember, you're making two sales here. You're selling the business concept on the community or on your area, and then you're also selling them access to a structure. So you've got to go through those, what buildings are available for rent and purchase, and what their infrastructure looks like, what's their access to support mechanisms, and where they located adjacent to different anchors that may represent their primary customer base before you engage long-term in that business development process. One of the things that we often tell our businesses that we're working with is don't be everything to everyone. An entrepreneur that walks into my office and says, and I ask them who their target customer is, and they say everybody, I know that that business is going to have problems. But oftentimes when we look at our downtowns, our community cores, we don't hold ourselves to that same standard. So we have to determine who our primary target customer is. Doesn't mean that other people can't shop or eat or take advantage of services, or that we can't split that downtown or core area into different sub-districts that we're working with, but we need to have an idea of who we're reaching out to so that we can better determine the types of businesses that we're trying to recruit to an area. When we come up with that sort of vibe or the psychographic demographic group, we need to communicate that to our advocates so that they can communicate with the types of businesses that we're trying to recruit to those local areas. And we say all sales have those three phases. You're going to sell them what you're going to sell them, you're going to sell them and sell them what you sold them. But in our case, we're going to sell businesses on the concept of opening within the core area based off of the data and the market opportunities that we have, not how it benefits us as a community and us as an organization, but how it can benefit them. Then close the sale. And then as we're congratulating them on opening, we're going to talk about the types of businesses that will enhance their ability to succeed or should locate because of that business opening within the area. So there's a lot of public outreach that occurs to empower other people to become part of the recruitment process. This isn't something that you can typically do just on your own with a small staff. We have a staff of 2 full-time people and an intern here, and we have to do a lot of other things beyond just the recruitment of businesses. So making sure that we have a clear idea in our mind of what we're trying to achieve is important. One of the tools that we use to achieve that sort of outreach is a business investment guide. And this is something that we put together with a local marketing agency that we work with closely, both in our business enhancement committee, some people call that economic vitality or economic restructuring, and our design committee to come up with some different points of interest. We have the physical guide. We'll have an online version of the guide. Right now, we're working on enhancing our own EmporiaMainStreet.com website to create a fillable form that adjusts more fluidly as we activate different portions of our local economy. So don't reinvent the wheel. We learned a lot of the pieces of our business investment guide the hard way by messing up recruitment efforts and getting some good feedback on those recruitment efforts to determine how we can improve. And because of that, we came up with 8 basic things that need to be included that are on this table of contents. So again, we use IM Design Group to help lay out the physical form and an online form. They've got a shell that's up at the link that's listed on the screen. Basically, it falls into 8 different sections. Demographic data, so that people that are businesses can compare apples to apples if they're opening up a secondary storefront or a tertiary storefront, or for people that are starting up a business and it's their one-off. They need to know who they're selling to. So we're compiling all that demographic data in one place that's easy for them to find. Nobody wants to be really the first in when it comes to development activities. So highlighting those different businesses that have just recently opened, or those different development activities that have occurred within the area, is an important point to show that the area is on an upswing. Don't lead with incentives, but incentives are important. If the market's not right, people aren't going to land there regardless, but it's important to have a comprehensive listing for people to choose from. So that's our third point. We want to paint a picture of appropriate businesses per area. So we talk about locations and sub-districts within our area to talk about the appropriate business types. It doesn't prevent people from locating in other areas. It's just something that we want to cover so people know kind of our overall plan. Understand traffic draws, even if those traffic points are indirect. We have an eye doctor, for example, that's a big music fan that decided to pick a location within our downtown area because it was adjacent to a lot of different music festivals, and he thought that that was cool. Doesn't really fit within the eye doctor vibe, but by listing our events and activities, it helped us from a recruitment standpoint. Almost every business needs quality employees. So one of the things that we identify as workforce, and that's really important with some businesses that are technical in nature or restaurants. We have a local Flint Hills Technical College that has a culinary arts program. So as we're doing outreach to restaurants, it's one of the things that we talk about a lot. And then a list of locals that can help with incidental. So attorneys and accountants and bankers and construction folks that can help those businesses get started up and succeed. And we always say one of the things that we overlooked early on in the process was quality of life, because if you can't convince somebody that this is a community that they would want to live in, they might feel like that their workforce or customer base would erode over time, and it becomes a harder sell. So you need to talk about the community as a great place to live for those potential businesses that are looking at your community. So this guide and the shell of this guide is online at the link that we've listed, along with some other Main Street-esque sort of tools, but that's the basis of our guide. As we're utilizing the guide, we're going to target those niche businesses that fit the target demographic for our community. We're going to use some different tools, like Esri is one of my favorite tools, and their tapestry guides to know who we're talking to, and those different groups. As we're doing outreach, we'll produce what we call a most wanted list. So it's essentially a list that our community talks to us about, that we vetted through market gap analysis to publicly state these are some businesses that don't have guaranteed success, but if we follow our data guidelines, it showcases an opportunity for an entrepreneur that can take advantage of something that we've vetted. We're going to look, if we can't produce an entrepreneur, we're going to look for businesses that have 2 or more locations within the region. And then we're going to try and find somebody that has a connection with that business, so that we're not just cold calling. Cold calling has a pretty low success rate, so it's kind of a last resort. So what we're going to try and do to supplement that is find a connection and exploit that connection to have a conversation with somebody that's a decision maker. And we're going to refine our information by surveying the local community, usually on a yearly basis. We're going through a survey process right now. And then remember that as we're communicating with those different businesses, we're selling the community on how it benefits their business to open up a location of why, utilizing good data, we think that they have the opportunity to create a profitable enterprise, not necessarily just why it's good for the community as a whole. Now, we say that the most efficient way to have a successful marketing strategy that targets businesses from a recruitment standpoint long-term is to create your own. And we do a lot of work with something that's called a Start Your Own Business class. I've talked about that on the national level before. We're now up to 80 businesses that has started or expanded through that class, and I think we're in our 15th year of that class right now. There are other versions of Start Your Own Business classes. If you've ever read the book Who Owns the Ice House, or the Ice House Concept, the Kauffman Foundation, which is a great regional foundation that we have, promotes that. There are companies like Co-Starters that work on business development classes for entrepreneurs. And there are area competitions that can enhance your ability to contact entrepreneurs. Now, the problem with some of those different competitions is they can be glorified public speaking contests, so you have to take them with a grain of salt. But there are some competitions out there, like youth entrepreneur competitions, or I like the Holt competition that a lot of colleges engage in for actual entrepreneurial development and identification. Within our building, we engaged in a capital campaign over the past few years, and we've just moved in this October to our building that includes a business incubator. So it's built into 3 6-month time periods, with 6 months of zero rent, 6 months of reduced rent, and 6 months of market rate rent for entrepreneurs that meet basic guidelines. And then we have a fabrication lab that we're in the process of developing for those people that are in rapid prototyping or more tech-oriented business styles. So we can build a bullpen by engaging those people within our own physical structure, and a lot of different entrepreneurial development or economic development agencies are starting to engage entrepreneurs on that level. So as we're doing a recruitment effort, we're not just taking a shotgun approach. We do have people that wander in the office with some pretty interesting business ideas, but really we're targeting different types of businesses that we think are more survivable given the trends that we're seeing. Some of those are integrated production or value-added sorts of businesses. Of course, we have a lot of events and activities, so those that generate that, and places that people can engage as kind of those third spaces. And then different businesses that can work together with other businesses in larger areas that we have to pare down into sort of a vignette look. So we're getting away from the old restaurants or just trying to turn tables as quickly as possible, or the widget resale sort of mentality that's more industrial in its feel, to more of an organic sort of business model that we're looking at to reach out to and place within our downtown area. So what that means really from an integrated production standpoint, we have, for example, a coffee shop downtown that we worked with a zero interest loan program to roast their own coffee beans. And that creates an integrated production where if you want that particular roast, you're going to go to that particular coffee house. We have one of only 2 what they call urban wineries, a winery that produces within a city within the downtown area. It's something that if you want those particular wines, you're going to have to go to that particular winery. So they stop kind of the showrooming effect just because of the unique nature of the products. We have a chocolatier that not only produces within the downtown area, but she ships to other areas when the temperature is appropriate. And that becomes a more survivable business, because if you want a Sweet Granada chocolate, you have to go to the Sweet Granada or one of their outlets. Artists, we have a great brewery within the downtown. That integrated production model is something that we want to look for on a consistent basis. And we can spot some of those different people through events and activities. They may be one of the vendors that we have at a different event or activity that we can reach out to and talk about storefronts in the long term. Plus reaching out to our network about people that have a particular talent and then working with them over time to try and engage those talented people in an integrated production storefront. We'll also look at value-added businesses, and value-added are a little more difficult, but think about your local antique place that may be a source of people that can do kind of shabby chic furniture if they can add some different painting elements. We have an antique place within our downtown area that's called European Antiques that's also one of the best upholstery businesses within the region that brings people in from a large regional area, and those people, while they're here, will shop and eat at different places. We have a place called The Vault, which is a meat and cheese place that's starting to smoke their own meats and cheeses that is creating a regional following. And then we have a mechanical clock repair specialist that has a business called Time Travelers that went through our Start Your Own Business class, and he's actually got a multi-state following because it's a rather rare type of business concept that can pull people in from several different states on a more consistent basis, and while they're here, they're engaging in other shopping and dining activities. So it's one of our focal points. Event generators. By event generators, I mean businesses that have the ability to generate events by the very nature of their business, or maybe people that have started events or activities that we can back into different types of storefronts. For example, Emporia is the home of the world's largest disc golf tournament, which is called the Glass Blown Open. After engaging that business, Dynamic Discs, within the Glass Blown Open, we help them with both a storefront within our downtown area, and then also with a larger production or distribution facility on the outskirts of our town. Flint Hills Music, we have some local musicians that were really into the music scene. Tim Moan and his wife Christy that started a music store. Actually, they took over a music store, but that was an ability for us to retain based off of events like Live in the Lot, which is something that Flint Hills Music participates in. It's an outdoor concert series. We're the home of the Dirty Kanza, and that's one of the world's largest endurance bicycle races. And after a few years of the Dirty Kanza, some of the ownership within that group started their own bike shop, Gravel City Adventure Supply Company, to take advantage of that niche market that they created within the local area. We have a lot of people within the Emporia area that also participate in arts and activities. We utilize our refurbished Granada Theater as one of those different areas that can enhance local restaurants and other people. So it's something that we'll have on tours. We have a large Latino population within Emporia, and by working with them through Cinco de Mayo activities, and this last year we had our first Dia de los Muertos, or Day of the Dead activities. We've been able to engage some potential entrepreneurs on Spanish style or Central American style markets, and then we have a variety of different restaurateurs, including the group that you see in the center, Casa Ramos, that's been able to expand as some of our other events and activities have expanded. We have 3 bike shops in our downtown area now because we're a huge biking community, and working with those different bike shops for their own individual sort of events like Le Grind that you see, which is a stage race event, has helped stabilize some of those different businesses and allowed for expansions over time. So we can kill different categories. If you want a bike that's of decent quality in the state of Kansas, a lot of people make the trek to Emporia, Kansas, to check out some of the different selection that we have available. We also emphasize hangouts, and the reason when I say hangouts first, these are places that people feel comfortable hanging out for long periods of time for a variety of different reasons. So we have got an Irish pub, we've got coffee shops. We also have our new facility that's more of an entrepreneurial hangout. And that's important because we talk about during the recruitment process, there's something that we call entrepreneurial friction, where we're presenting data, we're talking to people about market opportunities, we're trying to match up skill sets, but the more entrepreneurs can engage with other entrepreneurs in those long-term hangouts, the more successful we are in actually converting concepts into brick and mortar stores. So it's something that we work on a consistent basis to create those community conversations. And when we look at some of those business types that we've talked about targeting, one of the things that we've learned is the employees of entrepreneurs oftentimes make great entrepreneurs. Now, the entrepreneurs that are currently employing those employees aren't super thrilled with that all the time, but we're constantly on the lookout for talent that's willing to engage in an entrepreneurial activity. And the more exposure somebody has to an entrepreneurial activity, the more likely they are to actually move forward with some of those different storefront plans. Flipped and shared space pieces is something that over the past 5 or 6 years we've had to work on a more consistent basis. And by this I'm meaning a lot of our downtowns have these gigantic storefronts that were once part of department stores or multiple buildings that were kind of meshed together. And those are becoming harder and harder to find tenants for because supply chains are a little more well-defined now. You don't have to have a massive storeroom. You can turn over your properties a little more consistently. And people are looking for maximization of their per square foot sales so that they're not building too much building because it just looks empty if you can't fill it consistently. So the pictures that we're looking at here, Complete Works, the coffee shop that we have, and the yoga studio was all part of one furniture store at one time. There's also a real estate firm that's in the back of the coffee shop. So finding different business concepts that can work well together is part of a holistic recruitment strategy. And some of those different strategies seem a little weird, but we've got the Gravel City Adventure and Supply Company bike shop that we talked about briefly earlier. That was a function of the Dirty Kansas. The front half of that shop is a high-end men's clothing store. And we found that a lot of people that are into being physically fit, and if you can spend as much money as a customized bike will run you oftentimes, those people don't bat an eye when it comes to higher end men's clothing that show off their physique that they've achieved over riding thousands of gravel road miles. The other thing that we're trying to achieve when we talk about business recruitment overall is the retention of youth. And a lot of people will come to us talking about brain drain. And for us, we had to take a hard look at ourselves and say, okay, how can we impact the loss of folks that are highly skilled that may want to leave the area, and what's the issue, what's going on there? And the major issue that we found was we didn't have the jobs that they wanted. So if somebody is a computer information systems major that's fluent in several different programming languages, but there's no programming job within the community, then you have a question of, well, are you going to try and convert them to another type of job that they don't necessarily want, that they're not trained for, or do you try and find entrepreneurs within that scope or that realm of occupation to try and start up a business? And so if we wanted to retain youth, we had to recruit through our schools, letting them know that there are opportunities for people to get engaged within the downtown area. And then we have a lot of youth that sit either on committees from high school students on up, or that we try and engage on a continual basis to talk about the types of jobs that they're looking for, the opportunities that we have here. One of my coworkers has a phenomenal sort of internship program that we work with a local university to tie students that are more susceptible to staying in the area to local businesses, or engage those businesses on expansion opportunities that they could have with local talented youth. And we'll also work with youth, and we've got one pictured here, to try and identify some different ways that we can help those people incubate business styles that may represent an employment opportunity for people that we're not currently employing within the area. So we have to find out what are the sectors of our best and brightest that they want to work in that we don't necessarily have, and then let those people tell us what they need in order to start those businesses. It is a riskier sort of recruitment strategy, but one of the things that we've learned with recruitment overall is you're going to have some failures. So just know that going into that process, but you can learn something from all those different failures, and you can try and mentor people through things like the Start Your Own Business class, or incentive programs, or other sort of mentorship connections, in order to try and decrease the amount of the failure rate that you have if you're meeting with people on a consistent basis. So we have to go beyond the just ribbon cutting and patting them on the back and saying, go for it. You have to have a robust sort of back end if you're going to get into the recruitment efforts and have it be successful. Another thing that we've tried to engage with when we're creating more holistic sort of recruitment strategy is tying in development and housing to the overall business recruitment strategy that we want to employ. So we found here that about 40% of a person's disposable income is spent within pretty close proximity of their living environment if they're living in a downtown area. And that's allowed us to extend the hours of existing businesses. It's allowed us to recruit businesses into areas, especially as we're creating better spaces for those businesses to exist in. You can see the Roosevelt Plaza and Lofts on the bottom of the slide, that boarded up gas station, which is just to the right lower hand corner, is where that Plaza and Lofts now exists. So that is a concept where we were able to create some high quality, high value sort of options for businesses with a target market that's directly above them and visits those businesses on a consistent basis. The neat thing about that is it kind of changed our perspective a little bit, and it's something that I remind people of when we're talking about business recruitment consistently. Your property owners are business owners. Oftentimes we don't treat them like that. We don't treat them as entrepreneurs, and we don't run them through some of the different processes that we would normally work with entrepreneurs on. But successful properties oftentimes are one of your biggest assets when you're trying to recruit and retain businesses over the long term. Know your traffic patterns. So, creating those types of strong businesses that aid in recruitment through testimonials is critical, and you'll have to do that through enhancing traffic patterns by raising traffic in the slow times and creating bursts during intermediate times, and then your high traffic times become a great site visit opportunity as you're reaching out to different businesses. So, for example, when April, May, June rolls around, which are heavy event times within our downtown area, I've got some target businesses that we have identified from outside the market trade area that have 2 locations. They meet some of our market profile data. We've done some competitive market research looking at the difference between Emporia psychographically and demographically compared to the communities that are surrounding us, so that we can have a good idea of how to outreach and talk the language that we need to communicate to these potential businesses. And we're going to bring them in during these high traffic periods. Why? Well, it's just common sense that those businesses, as they look at our community during a site visit, we want the downtowns to be full. We want them to see how vibrant we are and people walking around. It also reminds us that we have to be who we are as a community. And a lot of communities, their leadership may not represent their community as a whole. The picture that you see here is from our Day of the Dead celebration, where we had some different businesses or potential businesses that we were working with that are booth vendors. And those booth vendors, we have some information that goes out to booth vendors for all of our different events or activities, where we're trying to talk to them about opportunities to open up a storefront on a more consistent basis. And this is who our community is. You're engaging the whole of Emporia right now. This is something that you could potentially take advantage of year round. So we're engaging our existing businesses and including them within the recruitment process, so they know where our business investment guides are at. They know how to direct people there. They know how to direct people to our office. They can communicate with us on a consistent basis. And as we're emailing out our weekly newsletter, oftentimes at least quarterly, we're talking about business opportunities, and we're engaging now the several thousand people that are on our e-news list to try and help us identify potential entrepreneurs or ins to business that meet our market criteria, that we can follow up then with business investment guides and site visits as we're trying to close the sale. We also utilize a variety of our different partners, like the Small Business Development Center. The image on your left is something that is an IBIS World Report that as we were going through the winery recruitment, we had to know a lot about that particular industry so that we could communicate with people more effectively. IBIS World Reports were a free report that we could pull in conjunction that team effort with the SBDC, so we could talk to the businesses more intelligently and embrace what our community actually was as an ag-based community, creating that value-added component for an agricultural commodity within the winery, and selling it that way was extremely important. But we also want to remain opportunistic. Two of our weird big industries that are way above our market capacity are disc golf, because we have now the second largest disc golf company in the United States. It's located in Emporia, Kansas, that is Dynamic Discs. That when we found them, they were just straight out of a home-based business, and we were trying to work with them towards growing. And then the cycling industry, because of some of our different cycling events here, that we've been able to grow. So if we would have just looked at data instead of remaining opportunistic, we would have missed those opportunities. Usually the weirder that we've found, as long as they have a business acumen from an entrepreneurial standpoint, the more opportunities that we have to enhance a more destination style business. But during the recruitment activities, sometimes here, because we've got a college in Emporia, Emporia State University, we have a bit of brand addiction, where we have people that will be tied to a particular brand name, and we say the preference should always go to the local alternative. So instead of having a Chipotle, for example, we took the information that we were receiving as a feedback piece that people wanted a Chipotle from the college realm, and we communicated that to potential entrepreneurs. And now we have a Salsa Street Grill, which is kind of the local alternative to that is adjacent to the university within our downtown area. So we had to know the information. We had to have the industry research and some incentives to make that happen. But as we could communicate with people entrepreneurially and act entrepreneurially as a Main Street organization, we were more effective in our ability to land those people through uses of publication, but also just the outreach pieces that we had done in advance of those publications and having the conversations with those potential entrepreneurs. So as I said, we're a 27-year-old Main Street organization, so we're a 27-year overnight success that still has a series of different problems. We're constantly dealing with a churn rate, which is okay for businesses trying to create new concepts within the area. But the 4-point approach has a great opportunity to serve as a lens through those successful recruitment activities that we talked about. Design is aesthetics, and business enhancement for us is creating those incentive packages and knowing our market data and promotion is creating those traffic opportunities, and our organization is creating that community pride and advocacy that allows for people beyond us as staff to reach out to potential entrepreneurs and giving people the tools that they need to reach out to entrepreneurs more effectively. So your competition is really outside of your district, and one of the things that we have to constantly communicate with our existing businesses is that their competition is generally in cities that aren't your city. You're losing people, or you're losing to online sales. So getting people that can work cooperatively as part of that recruitment process is critical. And finding the ability to consistently communicate to the community that the local alternative, the entrepreneur, that startup business that you have, as opposed to just being brand addicted or chain addicted, is what creates long-term shared success within the community. And talking about why that is, and engaging those businesses with local banks and local accountants and local attorneys and other local businesses so that they understand shared success, means that those different businesses and entrepreneurs will utilize some of the different tools that we have and strategies that we have, and use us more as a closer in some senses, as opposed to we're the only ones out there recruiting. That can get a little lonely pretty quickly, and we don't know everybody, and we've got other things that we have to do as part of our mission. So, creating that holistic strategy and then stair-stepping our approach over time has proven successful in Emporia. We still have a lot of room to grow, but hopefully some of what we've talked about briefly in 45 minutes, because there's a lot, can spur some questions that we can utilize for the rest of our time here, where you can ask the questions that you have, and hopefully we can expand upon some of the different more specific strategies that we have in downtown Emporia. So with that, what questions do you have?
Excellent. Thank you, Casey. A lot of good information. I know it was very quick, but I'm sure, Casey, I believe you're presenting in Seattle, so I'm sure some of this will be expanded on during the conference there in a couple months. So, but yeah, with that, feel free to use the questions panel. We have a couple in, but feel free to type those in, and we'll get through as many as we can in these last 10 minutes that we have. So. The first one was, at what point in size of a town do you think you need to have a business investment guide?
I think if most towns could use a business investment guide, but if you were going to formalize the guide and make the expenditure, I'd say any town that's over 5,000, I'd say that's you need to get on that investment relatively quickly. If you're smaller than that, maybe looking at a more regional business investment guide where you could partner with other communities within the region. But what we found within that investment, one, it's a good closing tool, but two, the amount of online hits that we get for the business investment guide is impressive. Millennials in particular, and somewhat Xers, they don't like the face-to-face conversation to start as a cold call. They want to do some market research independently, but if we could package it, we were more successful in making the pitch for our downtown area and some of the businesses that we wanted to engage as potential entrepreneurs within the region.
Great. Let's see. Two-part question here. Do you know what the cap rate is in your downtown and the rental rates per square foot?
Oh, what was the first part of the question?
What the cap rate is in your downtown?
Okay. So let's talk about rental rates a little bit, because that's a bigger question. But the rental rates, typically you'll have a per square foot rental rate, and that was a big part of when I talk about property owners as entrepreneurs, part of the education that we had, because one, our entrepreneurs were not renting things on a per square foot basis. They were saying, here's a building for $1,000 on a monthly basis. And so we had to do some education on per square foot and then how to record that, because typically when you're talking about larger scale developments, they're going to talk about the yearly per square foot rent rate, and a lot of people were talking about it as a monthly piece here. The average rent rate, there is no average rent rate. So what we had to do, and that's listed within our business investment guide, is break our downtown up into subsections. And each one of those subsections allow us to talk a little bit more specifically about the rent rate within that 2 to 3 block area, as opposed to trying to compare a massive former warehouse building that's adjacent to railroad tracks that has to be a very specific type of business that can locate in it, versus a building that's adjacent to our university. Just across the street from the university is our downtown. So there's a wild swing when it comes to the rent rates. That, newer developments, we'd say, $24 a square foot. So that's $2 per square foot on a monthly basis. And then we have some businesses that will engage in what we call triple net lease. So that business owner that's going in is responsible for a variety of different things: their insurance, the property taxes, all the different utilities, as opposed to just a simple lease where there are some buildings in our downtown area where utilities are included, and you just pay a fee on a monthly basis, and the property owner takes care of everything. So rent rates all over the map, but we had to break those down a little bit so that we could be more effective in communicating that to potential entrepreneurs.
Great, thanks, Casey. Did you have any info on the cap rate for your downtown?
Well, the capitalization rate that we have, again, is all over the place. So it's a hard question to answer. It really depends on that different subsection of the downtown. So when we're talking about utilization of assets, you're going to get a higher return often on some of those newer developments, or within our historic district within the downtown, those in buildings that have been invested in on a continual basis, and versus we've got a couple of blocks that we call the market area of the downtown area, and the cap rate on that may be a little lower. Oftentimes those are buildings that have been inherited, or during the late 1980s, the downtown Emporia as a whole struggled significantly. So we had some people that were buying buildings for $10,000 and they just haven't invested in them since. So any sort of activity that's generated in the building is just a plus, because the building's been paid for several times over. So I'd like to say that it was a consistent number on both counts, the rent rate, cap rate, but it's just not.
Great, thanks, Casey. Give folks another couple minutes if there's any last questions. Otherwise, Casey, I don't know if you have anything else you want to add or close with.
Well, I guess if nobody else has any questions, the only thing that I would add is what we talk about from the business investment guide and some of the different strategies employed here. It makes a great work planning piece for each one of your committees, where all of your committees can feel like that they're impacting actual business development and recruitment and growth within your downtown area, instead of kind of pigeonholing you just do aesthetics and you're just a party planner and you are in charge of trying to come up with incentives. putting this sort of concept in front of people, which we've had some other communities, R&D, rip off and duplicate the business investment guide before. They generally told us that it was the first time that they could engage all of their different committees simultaneously on a project where each of them kind of brought their different lens or perspective to something that became a pretty useful document.
Great. Looks like we got one last question that we'll close out. Are you aware of any other communities with a strong online and offline information for business recruitment?
Any other communities? Usually there are different organizations regionally that have good online components when you're talking about market research. Most communities that we deal with are pretty fractured when it comes to having all the information in one place. That's one of the reasons why we created the business investment guide. We were trying to see if we could emulate something that was done in other communities on a consistent basis, and we couldn't find anything that fit what we really needed to engage on recruitment on a larger scale.
Great. Looks like one last one, which I think you kind of addressed a little bit, but do you have or recruit any chain restaurants or businesses to your downtown?
We try and stick with franchises if we're going to do chains. We found that chains in the traditional sense don't work well adjacent to entrepreneurs, but franchises, because a lot of them are owned by people that are a little more entrepreneurial in their approaches. We've had some success with some of those different franchise type businesses, whether we're talking about investment counselors. We've got a Jimmy John's within our downtown that's pretty successful. We've got an Orange Leaf, which is kind of a frozen yogurt place that we were engaged in that recruitment process that continues to succeed. We've got some different businesses that are smaller chains. So by that I mean they may have locations in one or two other communities that we can deal with, but the big national chains isn't something that we engage a lot. When we're branding our downtown and trying to differentiate that from a recruitment standpoint, we try and say we're a place for entrepreneurs to differentiate what we are, and to try and reach out to entrepreneurs specifically, saying if you're an entrepreneur, you need to locate here. But chains, maybe in the future, as they continue to downsize and malls continue to go through their struggles, we may have to engage those businesses because they may not have the types of developments that they need to go into, but it's not part of our strategy currently.
Great. Well, thank you, Casey. It takes us right to 2 o'clock. So yeah, I'd like to thank you, Casey, again for this webinar. Lots of good info there, and yeah, we appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everyone.